So, as you know, SBF was very young. He built this crypto empire in his 20s. I think he's still around 29 years old. And he built this huge crypto empire worth billions and billions of dollars. He donated millions of dollars to the Democrats and political parties in the run-up to this election and the previous election. He sponsored sports stadiums. He invested in multiple funds. He sponsored sports teams. And he did this all in the span of 3-4 years. This was a 20-something-year-old kid who was sleeping under his desk at the office and managed to amass a wealth and build up this empire, which was valued at, I think, at its peak, somewhere around $90 billion or something along those lines, depending on how you calculate the raise. And I guess as an industry, we probably should have been asking a lot more questions as to what happened. So let's talk about what's emerged since this whole thing happened and how it all unwound.
Yes, the great unraveling.
The great unraveling, exactly. It started off with an article from a publication called CoinDesk. And in the article from CoinDesk was a balance sheet, or a version of the balance sheet of Alameda Research. And Alameda Research was the company that Sam owned before FTX. It was a market making and an investment and research company. And SBF used that as his vehicle to make the investments in FTX. It was almost like known as the holding company of FTX, so to speak. And in this balance sheet leak that CoinDesk did around Alameda Research's balance sheet, people started to notice that a few things. The first thing I started to notice is that Alameda Research had a whole lot of FTT tokens on their balance sheet, which is the token of the native token of the FTX exchange. The second thing is that people realized that the liabilities, or the assets that were on this balance sheet were actually very small, illiquid assets. And what they realized was that if you take the assets less the liabilities at a true value, you'd have Alameda bankrupt. And this started to do the rounds on Twitter. And after a few days, you know how things go on Twitter, they get worse and worse, and there's more and more noise. And as much as we hate that noise, it's actually proven to be right more times than it's proven to be wrong. It happened before all the other collapses. And then the blow came out, and the big blow was when CZ, the founder of Binance Exchange, who was the first investor in FTX and who exited his position in FTX over a year ago, tweeted, and he said, as part of Binance's exit from FTX last year, Binance received roughly $2.1 billion in cash, BUSD and FTT. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. We will try and do so in a way that minimizes market impact. Due to market conditions and limited liquidity, we expect it to take a few months to complete. Binance always encourages collaboration between industry players. Regarding any speculation as to whether this is a move against a competitor, it's not. Our industry is in its nascency, and every time a project publicly fails, it hurts every user and every platform. We typically hold tokens for long, and we held this token for this long. We stay transparent with our actions. And at the time, what people suspected was that this may have been a move by Binance to weaken its competitor. Mm-hmm. In light of the weak balance sheet that was published, what if all of a sudden your biggest competitor started to sell the asset on the balance sheet?
Yeah.
And that's when everything started to unwind, because the price of FTT crashed. The CEO of Alameda Research, a lady called Caroline, then tweeted and said to CZ, she said, "We will buy all the FTT tokens that you have for $22. The price was above $22 when this happened. And so that was another fundamental mistake, because what she highlighted a certain price point, and that price point was $22, which was a random number. It was a random price point. When people started to dig further, what they realized was that $22 price point was the price point at which the assets and liabilities of the balance sheet remained solvent. And because they had used this FTT token as collateral to fund a whole lot of their deals, as leverage to fund a whole lot of their deals, if the price went under $22, then they would effectively be insolvent. And so since that tweet, for a few days, FTX and Alameda were aggressively defending the price point of $22. there was a whole lot of selling of FTX token at $22 until eventually the price all broke and everything started to unwind. And that brings us to where we are today, where eventually FTX Bahamas, which is the FTX International, which is the entity that services a majority of the international operations, excluding places like Japan and USA, which are highly regulated, declared or was declared bankrupt by the regulators there, and a liquidator was appointed. This is a very sad story, and this is a huge concern for me. So I tweeted on 3 days or 2 days before this happened. I tweeted and I said, get your money off FTX. This is financial advice. That tweet is available for everyone to see on my Twitter profile at CryptoManRun. When I did that, multiple people in the industry threatened me with legal suits. People on the inside threatened me with legal suits, saying that I'm causing FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the exchange. That tweet got huge traction. I think it got close to 20,000 likes and retweets and whatever else, millions and millions and millions of impressions. And I stood my ground because the information that I had at the time showed me that this exchange was probably insolvent. Some people managed to withdraw their money, but eventually they got to a point where they couldn't fund the withdrawals anymore. And that's where the point where Sam Bankman-Fried put up his hand and said, look, I'm sorry. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and do right by the users first. And after I've done right by the users, I'm going to move on to investors. But at that point, unfortunately, all the withdrawals had stopped because the exchange simply didn't have the assets or the liquidity to meet the user demands. And so unfortunately, since that point, withdrawals have been stopped, barring a few things which happened along the way. One, certain addresses which were KYC'd in the Bahamas, where FTX International was based, were actually allowed to withdraw for a certain period of time. And speculation is that those were employees or people that were KYC'd in the Bahamas, and they were actually allowed to continue withdrawing, and they did, even as short ago as 24 to 48 hours ago. This was happening. Multiple funds, users, etc., left money, unfortunately, and lost money, left money on the FTX exchange. And where we are now is that, unfortunately, we've gone into Chapter 11, and they've been declared bankrupt in the Bahamas, which is very scary. And the reason I say it's very scary is if you recall the famous Mt. Gox incident, where there was an exchange, there was a whole lot of Bitcoin that went insolvent. And that was 8 years ago. It was in 2014. It was 8 years ago that exchange went insolvent. And only now are the liquidators in Japan starting to file the right paperwork for people to start getting some of their money back 8 years later. And I don't expect this is going to take as long as that did, but I do think that unfortunately now users who had money locked up in FTX are going to have to wait many years to get fractions on their money back. And it seems that the liquidator that has been appointed in the United States is actually the same liquidator that worked on the Enron case. So, you've got I think they call him a pit bull or a bulldog of a liquidator. I'm just trying to find it for us over here. He's been called a pit bull or a bulldog of a liquidator, and he's put in charge of actually resolving this and digging up. His name is John J. Ray III. He's the lawyer that's been brought up to clean up on Enron, which is, I think, pretty appropriate. And so, unfortunately, I think that users who have funds on FTX will see a fraction of their money back, and they'll probably only see it in a very long period of time, and it's very sad. The effects of this are going to unwind over the next couple of months in crypto. And so I think that you mentioned when we started this interview that this is a cold winter. I fear that this winter is going to get a whole lot colder, and I'll tell you why. Let's look at all the different affected parties by this. So the first affected party is the investors in FTX. Big venture capital funds, a whole host of celebrities, including Mr. Wonderful, Tom Brady, Sequoia. The biggest and most prestigious funds in the world were investors in FTX because FTX, this blue-eyed boy of crypto, couldn't do anything wrong. That's one of them. And investors, well, okay, some of them, some of them are big high net worth investors, others are smaller investors, and unfortunately they get hurt. But that you kind of know when you're investing in something, you know you're taking a risk. The second bucket of people that are affected is the users on FTX. Innocent users on FTX who put their money onto an exchange that went by the slogan of the safest and easiest place to buy crypto, or the most regulated place to buy crypto, something along those lines. Their money is now gone and they can't get their money out. And I really wish I could have helped more people. I tried my best to help more people get money out of there. That's the second part. And remember that is the money that was fueling our industry, that was being reinvested in our industry. And that brings me to the third bucket of people that are affected by this, is the hundreds of projects that FTX and Alameda invested in, which you now have this bankrupt entity as your shareholder, which owns huge portions of your tokens. Like, let's think about a token like Solana, where FTX own a huge share of the tokens in circulation.
Yeah.
And now that's probably in the hands of the liquidators. The fourth bucket of people that are really affected by this is projects that raised money but kept their money on FTX. So think if you were a crypto project, you raised a whole lot of money, maybe sometimes from FTX, maybe sometimes from others, and you left your money on the exchange, and now your runway to build this amazing project that you've got all these people working on is locked up on the exchange, and you have to close down your project. And we're hearing of huge projects in the industry, new projects, old projects that raised a whole lot of money, which was sitting on FTX because everyone trusted Sam. So this contagion is, I mean, we're in the eye of the storm, but the effects and the after effects of the storm are going to be cleaned up for a long time. And, you know, it's upsetting for people like us because we work really hard to build amazing things and to educate people because we believe in decentralization and the promise of what Bitcoin can do. And then someone like Sam comes along and destroys years of progress that we've made, has been destroyed. And when I say destroyed, how long will it take us to bring new money into this industry? How long will it take us to bring all that money into this industry so people can trust this industry again? That's going to take us a long time. How long is it? How much regulation is this industry, excessive regulation, is this industry now going to face? So, I mean, it's a huge catastrophe, and I expect the cleanup operations from this storm to last a long time.